Fuck you, you high and mighty weasel!
I have been in love with the Grand Theft Auto games ever since my older half-brother snuck me a copy of Chinatown Wars on DS when I was like 12. Nothing will make you more thankful for older siblings than having one sneak you a GTA game that your parents would kill you for playing. These are some of the best games you can play, even now. They are some of the most revolutionary and prestigious games in the entire medium. And I was actually working on a big-ass video on San Andreas when I saw this message from Rockstar's Twitter account stating that they were making the next installment in the series. It took me some time to fully process that. I was 15 when GTA 5 came out, and here I am, almost 24, and only now am I hearing confirmation that GTA 6 is a real video game. I was starting to think Grand Theft Auto was over, but now there is a glimmer of hope over the horizon. So I think now would be as good a time as any to discuss what I want to see in GTA 6, you know, what developments I'm hoping for in this next installment. And I actually have been wanting to make a video on this for a while. It's worth noting that Rockstar, despite telling us the game exists, has given us next to no specifics on the game, so I have no idea what to expect. I will say that Rockstar has a pretty good track record of putting out quality games with ridiculous detail and production value, even if the gameplay has its flaws. There is some uncertainty with the absence of Dan Houser and Laszlo Jones, but hopefully Rockstar has enough good people left over that they can put out something as special as the previous games. Rockstar has spent decades solidifying itself as one of the most consistent game developers ever, so for them to suddenly drop the ball very hard after all this time would be disastrous. Like they could ever do that. But in my fantasy world, Rockstar will pull through, and GTA 6 could look something like this. Let's start by discussing the most important thing in all the GTA games, the open world. There is no doubt in my mind that wherever they choose to set this next game, the world will be immaculately detailed and beautiful with tons of subtle and not so subtle details that all combine into a world that feels real and enthrallingly atmospheric. Rockstar has always had incredible visions for alternate parallel universes that mirror society and launch its absurdities to the forefront, and they have gone through painstaking efforts to bring them to reality. Not only is Rockstar the king of creating open worlds, but they have been for 2 decades now. That being said, what I would want above all else is for them to explore new territory. Liberty City and Los Santos are great, but we've seen them multiple times by now. If they were going to retread ground again, I would hope they choose Vice City, because that hasn't really been revisited since it first appeared in 2002. I would love to see how Vice City looks when brought into the current era of game hardware. Not like that. I'm wanting some of that Red Dead 2 level graphics with hyper-realistic smoke and fire effects. I don't know where they would go necessarily if they were to go somewhere new. The only rule seems to be that it has to be an American city, so I guess it can't take place in Toronto, which is a shame because it'd be nice to see a place that I'm actually familiar with. They could have brought back Honest Ed's or some shit. Keeping it in America is kind of important for making the big sales numbers because of how familiar everyone is with American culture and politics. Putting it somewhere else I don't think would be impossible per se, but I think it'd be a big gamble that they wouldn't be willing to do. So here's an idea. It starts out in this crappy Midwestern suburban hick town nobody's heard of, but halfway through, the character has to go into the big city to uncover some deep conspiracy or something. It's like GTA 5 if you spent way more time in North Yankton before moving to Los Santos. I don't know, but there's an idea. I know they're not taking ideas, they probably already have it worked out, but I'm dreaming up some stuff here. You know, I'm just trying to get the gears turning. Another thing I would like from the open world is more buildings with actual modeled interiors that you can enter and explore. Grand Theft Auto 4 was great about this, where there were actually a lot of apartment buildings and museums and restaurants and whatnot that you could actually enter and explore, which made the world feel much more fleshed out and lived in, and much less like a diorama that happens to look pretty. Los Santos is a beautiful place, but in some areas it couldn't help but feel a little bit more flat than GTA 4. GTA 5 took a regressive step backwards in this area, where there were some buildings you could enter, but it was much less common and not as impressive because it was most often an incidental thing during missions. Red Dead 2 was better about this, but because of the setting of that game, there were simply fewer buildings to model, so it wouldn't have been as ambitious an undertaking. I realized that modeling the living space of every single apartment in an apartment complex for a billion apartments in a big city would be a monstrous task that might not necessarily be worth it to a lot of people. Not even to speak of whether or not a modern console can render all that crap. I mean, it maybe could with some clever tricks, but I haven't made a GTA game, so I wouldn't know. But it would be nice to see a significant step up from GTA 5 in terms of interiors. A big trend in open world games is to just make the map bigger and bigger and bigger until they're so mind-bendingly massive that yes, they do look beautiful and beyond impressive, but only a portion of them feel like they're being utilized in a proper way. The GTA series has often tried to mitigate this by hiding collectibles and little objectives in discrete locations, but as the maps have gotten more huge and wide and sprawling, it starts to feel less effective, and it starts to feel like they were randomly distributed. It's a little hard to make every single corner of a map this scale serve a purpose besides world building, so I'm not sure how they could address this necessarily. A possible solution that would really fly out of left field is if they didn't try to make the map mind-bendingly massive at all, and instead made it just generally large but more densely packed with meaningful content. I find that unlikely given the history, but it'll still be impressive somehow. I think it's a given that the map will be bigger than before. I just know that if after all this time the map is even 3 square inches smaller than Los Santos, the gaming community will commit fucking acts of terrorism. GTA 6 could benefit a lot, not from looking forwards, but actually backwards to their first breakthrough title, GTA 3. This game is not perfect, and it never was. 3 has way less polish in about every respect, which makes sense. The combat sucks shit, you can have 5 police cars spawn on top of you for a fucking 1-star wanted level, you can't even climb over a chest-high platform without doing a very specific jump, and missions that would be trivial in any other GTA game are absolute bastards in this game. However, the thing that makes GTA 3 worth playing today is how unstructured and unscripted the missions are. The mission structure in the later GTA and Red Dead games tends to be very strict and rigid, and if you deviate even slightly too much, you can fail the mission. GTA 3 on the other hand is like, oh shit, you lost a shitload of health, okay. Now remember that body armor you found on the other side of the map 7 years ago? Yeah, just go drive over there and then come all the way back here. We're not going anywhere. The missions are much more open to creativity, and if you watch that Nakey Jakey video like I told you to do a billion times, you'll have an intimate understanding of that. Now imagine that openness to player expression of GTA 3, except combined with the actually functional controls of a video game that came out after 2007. Now we have ourselves a game. And we've seen a lot of modern open world games that actually do take advantage of the openness of the world and make experimentation easier, like MGS5 and Breath of the Wild and well, there's probably more, but those are the big ones. Speaking of MGS5 and Breath of the Wild, something GTA could benefit greatly from, in my opinion, is stealth mechanics that are actually somewhat functional and work in a lot more of the missions. I remember there was one mission in San Andreas near the end where you infiltrate a military base to steal a jetpack. It was really exciting for what it was because there were a lot of options in how you approach it. You could take out enemies with silenced pistols, you could shoot out searchlights, you could just go guns blazing, which meant you'd have to use a different entrance, but if you succeeded in stealth, you could use the normal route. It's definitely not the most fleshed out level of stealth, but it was exciting and had a lot of potential. Now just imagine if they could do that with actual dynamic stealth in their missions, taking inspiration from the great wealth of stealth games that have been released in the interim, instead of just bonking the gardener on the head by pressing circle because the game told you to. Oh, and as a side note, please don't ever put missions like this or this in a video game ever again. Thank you, Rockstar. People who played GTA 4 may remember a lot of little details, like how you could pick up objects off the ground and throw them at people or through windows. Not to mention an actually fleshed out combat system that wasn't perfect, but was a lot more dynamic and engaging than GTA 5, where you just punch someone and they die in one hit like you're Mike Tyson or something. Then there's the sandboxing. Everyone knows that the best part of GTA is just running around and murdering innocent cars and people inside the cars to no end. Literally just being a maniac and raising hell. At least that's what everyone says. Now, depending on who you ask, raising hell in an open world and indiscriminately murdering people is its own reward and doesn't really need any further incentive. If you're asking me though, I've never really felt that way. Usually when I kill innocents in GTA or Red Dead, it's because I wasted my money on clothes or guns like an idiot and I needed $3 to pass a mission. Except you usually don't, because the missions give you like $18 billion every time, meaning that any money you get from killing people is largely negligible by comparison. I will say this though, in GTA 3 when you blow up cars even during sandboxing, you get money. This directly incentivizes chaos, but this is the problem. GTA has since become far more narrative heavy and somewhat realistic, which is at odds with this kind of lunatic arcade style of chaos, and the series has since been forced to dance between those two styles. Which brings us to Chapter 3. Everything I've talked about so far is subjective, but it's worth noting that this part of the video is probably the most subjective of all, so please keep that in mind. I don't have this down to an exact science. This is just how I feel. Now, originally, the GTA games followed the John Carmack principle of storytelling, which is to say that they didn't really care about it too much. GTA 3, the story is that your girlfriend shoots you and leaves you for dead. Then you bust out of jail immediately and do 51 missions where you kill some wise guys for a bunch of bozos who are trying very hard to sound like Joe Pesci, and the protagonist doesn't talk or even have a name. Well, the wiki says his name is Claude, but I have yet to hear anyone actually use that name when talking to him. The story of Vice City takes some inspiration from things like Scarface in Miami Vice, but the plot itself is mostly, "Hey Tommy, kill this guy. Hey Tommy, now kill this guy. Hey Tommy, you killed the wrong guy. You insult this family. You betray me. Fuck you." That's the story of Vice City. Then San Andreas took it a step up and told a pretty engaging story about loyalty, betrayal, and corruption, and the concerned parties are actually somewhat developed, so when something happens, you actually kinda give a shit. And it even went as far as to incorporate serious subject matter into its narrative in a legitimate way. And GTA 4 took it a step further, with no happy endings, more betrayals, and moral decisions that actually mattered in the long run. Now, you may have picked up on this at this point in the video, but GTA 4 might be my favorite game in the franchise. For me, 4 has the best story, because even though it still has a lot of that offbeat GTA humor and atmosphere, it feels like a gritty and realistic way of portraying the criminal underbelly. This is not Ocean's 11. This is Taxi Driver. Nico's violent actions in history come back to bite him in the ass on many occasions. It's not a fairy tale where you shoot 700 billion guys and then spend the rest of your life rolling around in money and fucking hot women like GTA 5. GTA 5, again, was a step backwards from GTA 4 in terms of story, at least I think. Even though you have all this funky stuff with spook-ass government conspiracies, they kinda copped out with the addition of the Death Wish ending, where all three protagonists just team up and kill the entire government and everyone who ever messed with them in one fell swoop, and they all walk away like, "Hey, $1 million, baby," and that's just it. That's the story of GTA 5. You kill 3 billion people and then live happily ever after. Suffice it to say, I think I would enjoy something closer to GTA 4. That being said, when I said I liked 4's story best, I did mean it, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. The funny thing about GTA 4 is that the story seems like it's trying to openly criticize and ask serious questions about death and to make you think and feel, to make you take it seriously and ponder what it is to be a hell-raising mass murderer. Niko Bellic himself is traumatized by his past as a veteran in the Yugoslav wars and having to reckon with all the horrific atrocities he committed during that time. He's trying to establish a moral compass and move away from that vicious lifestyle. This kind of story would be a great fit for a game that preaches non-violence and gives you ample means to exercise it, and maybe even incorporates player agency into the narrative, but this is Grand Theft Auto we're talking about.
You think I haven't killed a clown before? What the fuck is happening?
This is the tricky part. Grand Theft Auto loves the idea of consequence-free wanton violence and has sold itself on that, which makes it awkward when it tries to take itself seriously. Nico goes, Roman, I don't want to kill people no more. And then in the gameplay, you decide to go fucking about and killing people. And it's like, actually, Roman, I changed my mind. This is very fun. And then Roman's like, Nico, no, look, come bowling. And he's like, I don't want to go bowling. I just want to kill people. And this has gone on too long. Even though killing people outside of missions is a matter of player agency, there isn't really a benefit to that one way or another aside from picking up a baby amount of money or getting an achievement. Likewise, there isn't really a detriment either, besides getting wasted or busted. Much like the rest of the games, it's just something you do if you feel like it, and it doesn't fucking matter at all. It disconnects the story from the open world. Red Dead 2 had an interesting solution for this, where the honor system actually changed some of the interactions between the characters depending on how high or low your honor was. San Andreas had the respect meter, which was more of a gameplay feature where you were allowed to recruit more gangsters as it filled. Maybe they could create some combination of the respect meter and the honor system to not only make gameplay more engaging, but also change the story in certain ways. In Red Dead 2, despite the little details, the end results of the story are ultimately the same no matter what your honor level is, but it was still a nice detail, as though the campaign and the sandboxing were actually acknowledging each other. It is a bit of a tricky proposal because Red Dead has always been more down to earth and less of a parody than GTA, but maybe, you know, if they go for a more Nico Bellic story instead of a "Tommy, you betray me" story, it could fit a little better. Another thing I would consider is the era. 4 and 5 took place in the contemporary time period of their release. One might assume that's the approach for the new game, but I don't know if the current societal climate would make for a very engaging open world. Knowing Rockstar, the cops in GTA 6 would probably give you a 5-star wanted level for leaving your safe house without a mask on, which would make for a very annoying game in my opinion, but hey, that's just me. All of this is to say that maybe Rockstar could do a retro time period again, like maybe the early 2000s. I mean, that's retro now. Or even something as recent as 2019, before the world shut its ass down and began a gradual descent into chaos. I don't know, but it's something to consider. Maybe if they were willing to shell out the money to license Michael Jackson again, maybe another game that takes place in the 80s would be fun. Imagine what all those shitty hairstyles would look like with Nvidia hair physics and shit. For that alone, the 80s would be a good choice. The final product that this game will become is very up in the air at this point. We know nothing, Rockstar has told us nothing aside from confirming its existence and development, and the absence of key Rockstar talent is worrisome, and with the embarrassingly bad remaster trilogy that came out last November, there are grounds for concern with respect to Rockstar's mojo. As much as I would love for GTA 6 to be a masterpiece video game when it eventually comes out in 2053, when I'm an old ass man with every heart disease imaginable, I am also prepared for the possibility at this point that it could be a disappointment. It's not an easy thing to gauge because with the extremely long time since GTA 5's initial release 9 years ago this September, the expectations will inevitably be through the roof for a lot of people, and because of that, even if the game comes out great, there will be people who are disappointed regardless. That being said, I would reiterate that there may well be enough talent left over at Rockstar to pull off another groundbreaking title and will finally make me need to buy a PS5. That is, assuming my computer won't be good enough to run it anymore. Since we know nothing at this point though, all I have are dreams. Whether they will become reality, only time will tell. Thanks for watching, everybody.